Hello everybody, this is a quick revision lecture of the material that we covered in TP1. Since it's been quite a while now that we've done everything, I thought I'll refresh everything once a little bit and give you some pointers for the exam for this unit. So in my half of the unit we dealt with basically setting up Linux on our host. Then we did a little bit of virtual network setup, so set up some virtual machines and network them together, and then we did some routing and some DNS. So now, as discussed and agreed upon in the first semester towards the end, we agreed that in the exam there would be no DNS related questions, so there are no topics from this last lab sheet in the exam, because not everybody had the opportunity to get there, and since your main source of revision is your logbook, if most of you haven't done the DNS lab sheet, then you can't really revise from it, and it wouldn't really be fair to everybody. So we will be dealing with the first three lab sheets available, and I'll go through them and basically explain to you once again what we did and what to actually expect in the exam for this. So the first lab sheet was the CentOS installation lab sheet, the Linux setup. In this one we basically created our virtual machine that was the host in which we did everything we did. So the idea for this was to create a virtual machine called Prometheus. We gave it some hard drive, we gave it some memory. So the sort of information that you need to draw out of this is you need to know what are the basic requirements for a virtual machine in Linux to exist. What sort of hardware does it need to actually have or not. Once we go through that, it's typical Linux installation information that you need to know and remember about. So for example, the different types of packages, so in the software selection area, what sort of different packages you can get in Linux. The fact, for example, that in Linux you can get different configurations, so you can get a minimal install, which is just a terminal, or you can have a development workstation or just a GNOME desktop workstation, and so on. It is also a good idea to know the different modes of networking that VMware supports. So as you can see, the first one here, our Prometheus virtual machine is bridged. So you should know that what the different modes that VMware supports in networking are. So bridged, NAT, and host only, basically. Once we go through this, we're talking about basically partitioning the hard drive. So in our particular example, we created a custom partitioning. So we got rid of the home directory basically, and created a setup that only includes boot, root, and a swap. So a good idea would be to know what the basic or the minimum requirement for partitions on a partition table on a Linux installation would actually be. After that, we set up the networking. This information pertains specifically to the setup in the lab, so you don't really need to know anything about that for this part as far as the installation is concerned. And then from there on, we have the second part of the lab sheet. So after the virtual machine is being built, we have all of the commands. So the commands is pretty straightforward. You are supposed to know the commands. Yes, so you're supposed to know what it does, what the syntax is and everything. So so if I ask you for an example of a command, or if I show you a command and ask you, is this command correct or not, you should basically be able to answer the question. You should be able to know what a command does and what is the correct syntax for that command. I will usually not have questions on the bonus round material in the lab sheets, so you don't need to worry about that too much. Okay. So the first lab sheet was installation of the operating system and familiarization with the commands and everything else. The second lab sheet was creating the virtual network. So the way that we worked in the lab is we had our Prometheus VM, and in there we had all of our other virtual machines that we networked together, and we built our little virtual network in our computer. So we have the installation of VMware Player, how it all works. Perhaps you can figure out the different ways that you install software in Linux, so that would be a good idea to revise on. Do your research, so you can have a bundle installation like this is, or you can have an RPM installation, or you can do YAM install and so on. Once we have our VMware Player installed, then we build another virtual machine. So this is the next step here. It starts by NATing, so we use it like that as the first one. The installation steps are pretty much the same for as in lab sheet number 1, so there's nothing in here really to make a huge difference that I want you to know about. However, I do definitely want you to know about the process of cloning a virtual machine. So in VMware Player, how do we actually clone virtual machines? So the fact that we can copy the files across in the file manager and then just open the new virtual machine, and what changes do we need to do in there, like host name and IP addresses. This is a process that I want you to know how to actually do, go on with. Once the process of cloning the virtual machine was finished, we then went on to the virtual network. So for this, there was a script that was called VM_subnet. This was a custom script that we created, and that you had to basically go and change the IP addresses inside it according to the layout that we have in the lab. I want you to know how to basically run a script in Linux. Okay, so / and then the script. Perhaps how to set that script to run automatically every time when the computer starts, if you want to. There was another script in there, the fix vmnet dev, that basically I would like you to know, although it's not general Linux knowledge, it's knowledge that pertains to VMware itself. So we give VMware Player the ability to have a fourth type of network card present, which is a custom network card. Remember, we have the three basic options: NAT, bridge, host only. So now we run this script and we alter the program so that we create a custom option, and the custom option is what we're basically using here. Essentially, the custom option is pretty much a host only option, but we've customized it to use specific adapters in the network, the way that we've named them. We have our network diagram. I would like you all to know why the IP addresses on your network diagram are as they are, exactly what they mean. So why do I, for my example, have 3249, 3250, and so on. And the way to explain all this would be, if we go back onto Moodle after the virtual network setup, so we have the subnets file. So this is the file that's basically explaining all of the subnet masks and all of the allocations of IP addresses, network addresses, and broadcasts to all of the computers in the lab. So I want you to know why we did this and what we're trying to achieve with this. So basically, we're using CIDR in order to split a Class C network into 64 slices, so that then we can allocate one of those 64 slices to each of the 48 computers in the lab, so that we don't have any IP address conflicts between all of the different hosts in the lab that we're using. A good idea for you to basically have a look and understand more about Internet Protocol classes and everything else would be to actually go to firewall.cx. I did recommend this website. It's one of my favorite websites, and you can go here and read about classes, host IDs, network IDs, and everything else. Go through all of this. I would generally recommend, if you want to deal with networking, you should, in your life generally, read everything here. For the purposes of this unit on this exam, I would like you to read about supernetting and CIDR, because then that will help you understand exactly why we split the IP addresses in the class in exactly the way that we split them. So once you have that in mind, then you'll know why we set up the networking in the virtual machines as we did. It's all about the subnet mask and the IP addresses and everything else. So one other pointer that I would have is at the bottom of this file, I also explain the subnet mask. I have it in binary form. So if you also go to firewall.cx back on the website, you can see exactly how we can translate subnet masks or indeed IP addresses from their decimal form to their binary form. So I want you to be able to do the conversion between decimal and binary. Okay, so whether it's an IP address or a subnet mask, I want you to be able to do the conversion between the two without much issue. Alright, so now that we have our network and everything else, the next and last lab sheet that we officially dealt with in the lab was routing. So in routing, I would like you to know what is being used so that we basically achieve routing, so that we basically turn our Linux workstation into a router. We need to have a routing daemon and we need to have a routing protocol. In our case, the routing daemon was Zebra, was Quagga essentially, and the protocol was OSPF. In order to configure this, we would have two configuration files that are the basic ones, which is zebra.conf and ospft.conf. You were given examples of these and you are asked to edit the files to match your particular network settings on your computers. Alright, so I would expect you to remember A, for example, where those files actually lived, okay, the location of them is in etc. Quagga, and B, what they should look like inside. So zebra.conf should contain the names of the interfaces that were involved in the routing, and ospft.conf should contain the router ID, so the IP address of the router that Zebra and OSPF is running on, and the network addresses of the networks that belong to your computers that you're advertising to all of your routers around you. I would like you to know all of the commands involved in this process, so the fact that you do need to set the firewall with IP tables -F, or for example the packet forwarding command, exactly, how do you type this command, what its syntax is and what it actually does. I would like you to know how you actually run them in debugger mode, so zebra -F and then the location, OSPFT -F and then the location and so on. And basically, I would like you also to know how to set the service to start automatically every time the computer starts with the check config command. Okay, I will not ask you anything about NATing, which is the bonus round, because I understand that some of you might not have done it. It is an IP tables command, and an example of it was available for you to use, but I cannot count on it, so it should really be in the exam. Okay, so the exam will basically stop here. So it's those three lab sheets. Out of all of this, it is quite important that you understand the networking aspect of things. Okay, so how did we end up with this network diagram? Why do we use those IP addresses? I want you to definitely make sure that you understand the structure of this file and what it explains. I want you to understand the /30 that we use here, because we use it in ospft.conf. It's basically the 30 bits that we're using out of the subnet mask. Okay, it's those bits here that are turned into 1. So a class C subnet mask has a /24, which is those 8 plus another 8 plus another 8, which gives us 24. And because we're subnetting, essentially we're stealing away 6 more bits out of those 8 and turn them into subnet bits. So that's where the /30 comes from, and that's why this 255.255.255.0 of a default class C subnet mask gets turned into a 252 and gives us 4 usable hosts and basically 2 usable IP addresses between them, which is reflected into this. So we have a network address, we have a broadcast address, and usable IP addresses in between. So it is quite important to understand why this happens. It is in my video lecture as well. There's an explanation of it, and basically how we basically subnet and CIDR the class C network. Okay, so basic Linux installation stuff, operating system installation, configuration, locations of files, for example, where everything is, and all of the commands that you need to know out of this lab sheet. Basically, they are the most basic commands that you need in order to control the operating system and be able to manage it efficiently. Second lab sheet, VMware, virtual network, virtual machines, what sort of networking information you can have in there, what sort of networking configurations, how you can build and clone virtual machines, and how to basically run them, and in the end, some routing, how we can turn a Linux machine into a router, what software do we use, what protocol we used in the lab, and how does this all come together, and what is the end result. So the end result is that all of these virtual machines should have internet access to the outside world through the host and through vPrometheus 1 after routing has been configured on both. Okay, so the exam will basically be based on this information. Everything you need is here. Revise from your logbook, go through the lab sheets, watch the videos again, and if you have any more questions, just send me an email and I'll be happy to reply. All right, thank you very much.